Good morning, everyone. I am Alexandra Lang, and I'll be your host today. My friend Michaela Stewart will be helping me with my hosting responsibilities. Welcome to our training session on how to implement an internal audit committee at your church. Our trainer today is my godma, Cynthia Gordon-Floyd, CPA, CFE, and we will get started, but first a few instructions. As you can see, we are in webinar mode today, so we are asking you to please submit your questions to the Q&A only so we may organize them for the question and answer period. We will be unable to monitor the chat for questions, so please send all questions only to the Q&A. If you encounter any technical issues, feel free to send a private chat to myself or Michaela, and we will be able to assist you. We have posted to the chat the internal audit checklist that each of you should download so you can follow during the presentation. If you have any issues downloading the file, no worries. It will be emailed to all registrants with the link to the recording. All right, Gama, take it away.
Thank you, darling. Thank you, darling. It is a blessing to have my goddaughter and her friend Michaela to assist me this morning because God knows I need them very, very much. Dr. Davis, Amy Davis, is going to be joining us soon, I hope. And so we will just wait for her to come on and we will stop and get moving then. But right now, we are just going to get going. There is a lot of information this morning to share. And so it's, I just kind of got to roll through it. Thanks so much for just coming to this session. We just appreciate, you're constantly supporting the educational efforts of Turner Theological Seminary, as well as the Connection Lay Organization. You came to my last training as well. But we are trying to do lay and clergy education differently. We're trying to educate and teach on sound administrative and financial practices at our churches. And so that's what our goal is today. And so we are looking forward to this conversation. As I mentioned, if you all were in my last training on how to read an audit report, this is the one that I wanted to get to. I was really just waiting for us to have the opportunity to get on to this one because I'm excited about this one. This is where I think we're really trying to go here. We're trying to do what we're trying to do. And I'm excited about this because I think that this is a game changer. This training has the opportunity and the ability to really change the lives of our churches and how we operate. And so that's what our goal is today. And so that's what we're going to do. So moving on, here we go. And so when we talk about, what is the purpose of an internal audit function? We really just, let's kind of get to the point where we really can kind of understand what we're doing, why we're doing this, what is this internal audit thing? And so for those of you who have read the flyer that went out regarding this, we're trying to put into place an opportunity to put in consistent oversight in our church ministries, basically. And this can work for other types of entities as well, but this document that you're going to receive in the chat box, the internal audit checklist, is designed specifically for churches. And so we're trying to find a way to really be informed about oversight. And I also mentioned that, this is a way to just kind of put things in place to deter individuals who might want to be doing things or doing what they want to do, basically with whatever they may, whatever. Well, that's not the goal. We want to put things in place so that things are happening consistently. And so that's the purpose of what we're doing today. And I see that my dear friend, Dr. Amy Davis, has joined us, and I'm excited about that. And so she's in her car, I see, traveling. I know that she is off doing what she has to do, basically. And Alexandra, will you please introduce Dr. Davis for us, please?
Okay. Today we are honored to have Dr. Amy L. Davis with us. She is the newly appointed President Dean of Turner Theological Seminary in Atlanta, Georgia. Willing Stewart Academy is excited to partner with Turner Theological Seminary for this training session today. So Dr. Davis, please greet us. We are happy you are able to take time from your busy schedule to join us this morning.
Good morning, everyone. What a joy it is to be able to greet not only my friend, the one who keeps me, as I say, out of jail. I tell you, it is a blessing, not only when you have a competent CPA, but someone who loves their work and knowing that it is a call by God. So Turner Theological Seminary is excited about this partnership, but most of all, we're excited about the work of God. We must be reminded, clergy, laity, stewards, trustees, that if we don't protect the church, then we will allow the evilness to come in and the spirit of poverty to show up in our church and destroy the very thing that God has called us to protect. So I am looking forward. I'll be jumping in and out, but I'm looking forward for great things. And I wanted to make sure I put this PSA. We do have a certificate in church financial management. And Dr. Cynthia will tell you more about it. I was just in the 9th district and I shared that with them that it is important. It's important that we learn how to manage God's work effectively and efficiently. Thank you, Cynthia. And I'll chime in and out through, and I'm gonna turn off camera, but thanks again. Welcome, class. I hope that you enjoy it. And also, if you're looking for a seminary, you should think about Turner Theological Seminary. I believe that we are the seminary of choice. God bless you and have a blessed class.
Thank you, dearest. Thank you so much, dear one. I appreciate you so much. I really do. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. And Turner's in great hands. And so thank you, Alexandra, for the introduction, sweetheart. Okay, we'll keep on moving. Thank you, Dr. Davis. You may put a smile on my face. So informed insight. And so as I mentioned in my previous class on how to read an audit report, that I believe that an internal audit function literally can be better at detecting what's going on in a church and keeping things in order than an external audit function. As I mentioned to you basically previously in my previous training session, if you didn't attend that one, we can basically get you the link to that. That's up on our website, on the Willing Steward Academy YouTube page. But it is big. External auditors come in basically, and they don't know anything about your church. They don't know anything about how you do business. They don't know anything about, basically what you're trying to do. And so they have to come in and first of all, figure out who you are, what you're doing. And if you are unfortunate enough to hire an accountant that doesn't do a lot of churches, they're going to be somewhat confused about how you operate because we know churches are just a bit unique. Yes, we are, no doubt about it. And so it's important basically that when it comes down to this idea of audit function, that there is some familiarity. Secondly, you'll find also, and we went through the audit engagement letter, you'll see that an external auditor has all kinds of disclaimers about things that they can't detect. We don't say we can detect fraud, we can't detect errors and omissions. We're disclaiming a lot of that. We will try to detect it, and if we run across it, we'll tell you about it, but we're not necessarily sure we're going to be able, basically, to detect fraud. Well, that's a concern. Because we need to, first of all, have things in place so that we can detect and determine what's going on in our churches. We want things to go on consistent. We know most of the time everything is just fine, but it's important that we have procedures in place to ensure that. So when it comes down to internal audit, now we're talking about informed oversight. We're talking about people who are in the church. They know how it operates and they know how it's supposed to operate. Now, our policies and procedures may not be what we want them to be. But basically, we basically have an idea of how our church should run, and we have the people on the inside basically doing the audit work. Now, no, you're not going to be able to do it like an outside auditor will do. We outside auditors, we are, somewhat experts in internal control. We know how things should work, basically, but that does not mean that an internal person with the right tools cannot be an effective internal auditor. And that's what we're trying to establish today. And so also, this process establishes a systematic review process. You're going to do this frequently. You're going to do it no less than once a year. It could be done twice a year, but it's going to be systematic. So every year, you're going to be going through the process of reviewing and all of the above. And then you're going to help to ensure the integrity of your financial reporting. As we go through the audit form that you've received as a handout, you're going to see how we now get a chance to make sure that the financial reports that you are reviewing at your official board meetings, at your joint board meetings, and all of that, that those reports are consistent with what is actually going on in your finances. Nobody's going to be able to cook the books or cook the reports on you or give you reports that don't reflect what's real, because now we have a process in place that ensures that the financial reporting is correct, okay? And then also it's going to establish a procedure by which irregularities can be discovered and addressed. As we go through the checklist that I provided to you, you're going to see how it's a very systematic way, basically, to review and basically irregularities, things that may have occurred that should not have occurred. I'm going to show you how to detect those things and talk about how to deal with them as well. Okay. And so, as I mentioned, we have a lot of material to go through today, and I think I saw some hands raised and whatever. I'm probably not going to be able to address those at this point. When we get to the end and we have time, basically, but the best way to get a question in right now is to go through the Q&A, because I have a lot of information to share with you today, and I got to get through it, because that's how we're going to do this thing. And so definitely, if you have a question, please ask Michaela or Alexandra, and they will try their best to address it. But I've got to keep moving. Okay. And so now, my concern really with putting this in place, I don't want you to kill this thing. Okay. I don't want you to look at it and handle it in a way that really makes people dread it and not want to do it, versus encouraging people to, to want to do it, okay? And so, how can you avoid killing your internal audit function? Yeah, that's what I said, because you know how we do in the church sometimes, right? We get to moving on stuff and stuff, and people be like, oh, no, I don't feel like doing that. No, no, I don't feel like it. Well, that's not the goal. That's not the goal. So first of all, this is the church. Establish this process in a process of loving kindness. Okay, this is God's house. Okay, so put it in the place with, I'm not trying to find, get you, beat you up, whatever. I'm simply we're trying to put a process in place so that we are accountable, that we are at our best for the Lord, that we are being really accountable, and we're adding integrity to the work that we're doing simply by putting in policies and procedures and a committee to monitor and make sure that we follow those policies and procedures. Do it with loving kindness. And don't use it as an opportunity to dog out your financial folks. I tell you, you're going to kill it quick if you do that, because, okay, I've been here, so I can start preaching on this one, okay? Because your financial folks, they have a hard job. It's a hard job, and they may not, and a lot of times we have financial people who are doing it, they haven't been properly trained. That's why Turner and Willing Steward Academy is doing the work that we're doing, because we are trying to train them, but they haven't been trained. They just came in with their loving, kind hearts, willing to do work that other people don't want to do. And so this is not an opportunity to dog them out. It is an opportunity, should be, to treat them, to actually assist them with the difficult work that they have to do, and to find ways to make it better. And then also, it can help you also notice, as we go through the checklist, that your people are maybe overwhelmed and have too much to do and too much responsibility that should be, some things to be pulled off of them. So use it, don't use it, and don't do it. Don't dog out the financial folks, please. We don't want you to run them out the church, because then don't nobody want to do it at all. Okay, so don't do it. Don't do it. Okay, also, do not put any vigilantes on this committee and no Pollyannas. Any vigilante, anybody coming saying, I want to slash and burn, the pastor ain't doing this, the financial person ain't doing this, the stewards ain't doing this, trust ain't doing this, so I want to get on this committee so I can show them, no vigilantes. No vigilantes. They will kill your process because they're coming in with an agenda. That is not what auditors do. We don't come in with an agenda. We come in with our professional skepticism, but we simply come in trying to assist and help and basically monitor to the best of our ability. And no Pollyannas. None of those, oh, everything's okay, everything's fine, because those folks will overlook things intentionally, simply because they don't want to cause any problems, they don't want to cause any issues and all that. You don't need that. You don't need that, okay? No vigilantes, no Pollyannas. And y'all know who I'm talking about. Yeah, y'all do. Y'all know exactly who I'm talking about. Fill the committee with loving, dedicated, responsible, level-headed church leaders, okay? Not people who don't come to church, okay? If they're not, showing up, and you know how I go about this. You know what I will say about these types of things when it comes down to the finances of the church. And people being involved in finances who don't even show up to church. You come in and let them count money, but they can't come to sit through service. No. And so on this committee, what I'm thinking basically, and I'm going to talk about joint board and things like that, because there's not only AMEs on this line. So I need to mention that as well. We've got all types of denominations on this line. Okay. And so I'm going to talk from a general standpoint, because what we're talking about is not denominational specific. Not at all. We can talk about those things that are denominational, basically, but that's not what this class is really about. It is not, it is really non-denominational. And so basically, we're talking about folks who are on your official board, folks who are on your joint board. We're talking about ministry heads, okay? And we're talking about ministry heads. We're talking about officers of your ministries, basically. Yes, maybe a steward should be on it, basically, maybe not the chairperson, okay? But here's why I say that, a steward or a deacon or a trustee, maybe not the chairperson. Here's why I say that. This committee has to be as independent as possible. It's extremely important that they are independent. And so we don't want them to be led by anybody with possibly a hidden agenda or whatever. We want them to appear, basically, to be as independent as possible, okay? But we also want them to be involved. We want them to be someone who's respected, and someone who the church people, when they get in front of the church, they're gonna know this is somebody who's been around, they're part of us, they care about the church, basically, and they have this responsibility. It should also rotate, basically your folks should rotate. This should be a ground, a training ground for new commission on stewardship and finance, commission on your finance committee, trustee training. This is a training ground to get people now involved with what's going on in the church, to get them prepared for the next level of leadership, basically. It doesn't have to all be leaders. There can be other individuals. It would be nice to have youth. At least one young person on here, basically. Like I said, just, you're trying to get people involved, and you're trying to get people prepared for leadership, for the next step, and all of that. You probably got more questions about that, but I'm going to try to keep it moving, basically, because we got a lot of slides. Sorry about that, guys. How do we get this thing started? Well, since it's not in the discipline and it's not possibly written into your bylaws, if you're a Baptist church or a non-denominational church, probably not there. So we got to start off, of course, with the pastor. And then getting the pastor, and I know we have a lot of clergy on here today as well. Pastoral approval, and I know a lot of the clients that I serve, the pastors would be excited to have an internal audit committee in their church. And so this is something that really can just kind of help take some pressure off per se. So get your pastoral approval, talk to your pastor if they're not on the line about this, show them the video, whatever you like to do, basically. And then we're talking about the number of members. This committee should not have less than 3 members, basically. There needs to be ideally 3 persons. Now, there can be, if your church is small, they can be 1 or 2 persons. It actually can be 1 person. If your church is small, just 1 person going through the checklist to check and make sure you've got certain things covered is better than nothing at all. But ideally, I'd like this committee to be no less than 3 persons and not more than 7, because we're not trying to have a bunch of people and all of that. It doesn't take that. 3 people dedicated to this process in most churches is more than enough. It can be done this is also something I mentioned, doing it one time a year. Basically, it's something that it can be done in a day or 2. Now, your checklist is like, 5 or 6 pages or whatever. It looks like a lot of work, but if you have everything in front of you, we're talking about simply going through and checking off the boxes. You can do this, and you can do this efficiently and effectively in only a few days, okay? So number of members, and so term, I'm thinking 3 years. It's up to your church. This is something that you're forming at your own church. You do what you think is best at your church. I'm thinking 3 years. Give them a couple of years basically to kind of understand the process and come in and be very good at it. And then it needs to switch out. It should not be the same people on internal audit all the time. It should not. This is something that should rotate because, as I mentioned, this is a training ground for stewards, training ground for deacons, training ground for trustees, training ground for finance committee members and counting team members and all of that, okay? And even for other ministries, you want other ministries to understand how the finances of the church work, okay? Because keep in mind, this process is an integrity builder, okay? Our goal is simply to build on the integrity of the work that's happening. Because once we establish an environment where people trust what's going on, they feel free to give, okay? And we need people to give. Yes, we do, because how do we keep the lights on and keep the ministries flowing? And how do we clothe the naked, okay, and feed the hungry without resources? And so we want people to trust the process. But in order to do that, we've got to be transparent. And we have to have policies in place in order to be transparent. Okay, selection of the committee members. This should not be appointed by your pastor, okay? And you guys know what I'm talking about. I ain't got to go deep into that. You know the deal. It should not be appointed by the pastor simply because it needs to appear to be independent, okay? And so ideally, I think it needs to come from the body. It comes from your official board, basically your church meeting, your quarterly church meeting, however you do that. Some general group where nominations come from the floor or something like that, but make it so that people feel involved in that, in selecting the persons, and that the committee is aware that they are accountable to the church. Yes, they're going to report to the pastor first, and then to another probably leadership level second before it gets back to the church body. But the committee needs to understand that their responsibility is to the church body. That's who they're working for. This is going to head into the quarterly conference or whatever. But we're trying our best to make sure that it appears to be an independent body of independent folk. Okay? So this is not an appointed committee. It should be a selected committee. Okay? The date of review should be set when your treasurer, your financial secretary, whatever your head financial person is, whatever that person agrees that the reports and records are ready for review. Now, it shouldn't take more than 60 days at the end of the audit period. Hopefully, the checklist suggests that you do this on an annual basis, a calendar year basis, basically January to December. Even if your church is operating on a fiscal year, it is easier to do this on a calendar year basis, okay? And so then basically, and you're working in cooperation with your treasurer, financial secretary, or whatever, to say, when are the books and records ready? Okay, when are they ready for review? And so basically when they're ready for review, okay, then we come in as a team basically and do our work. Okay, so this is a work of agreement. We are agreeing on what we're doing and how we're doing it. Okay, and so that's when it should happen. Okay, try to get that done systematically and set it up so it's a systematic thing, and so that at a particular church meeting or at a particular church conference meeting, you know, the one that is held in June or whatever that date is, basically, that you're able to consistently have a brief report from your internal audit committee. Keep in mind, the report from the internal audit committee, even though there's, 6 pages here, that report should be, simply, we didn't find anything. We had a great report. We were able to fill out the certification, which we're going to talk about, and everything went well. It's a brief report. You have to go through a lot of details. Basically, for the initial report, you do want to go through detail because you want to describe for your church what the process is, what you're reviewing, what your process is, because as we said, we're building integrity here. We're building accountability so that people know this is what we're doing. And after that, then the report comes in. Internal Audit Committee has met. We have reviewed everything. We have issued our certification to the church, and everything is well. Now, if everything is not well, okay, let's say that let's talk about minor issues. And I don't have this slide, but I need to go through it. Minor issues versus serious issues. Minor issues are, we have 2 checks that actually got sent out with only 1 signature or something of that nature, per se. And it got sent out because Sister Ann was busy. She was, couldn't get back to the church in time, and we needed to pay the vendor. We had agreed on it. We just couldn't get that second signature on there. That's a minor issue. Or we're not getting that second signature on vouchers, per se, to initiate payments out. Well, we want to fix that. Okay. But it's not a major issue, okay? Because you need to understand, because in this internal audit process, you're going through figuring out and talking about basically the things that occurred and why they occurred. And if they occurred and for a reason that makes sense, then the reason made sense. So those are minor issues that are not necessarily going to be reported at the church level. They may be reported, going to be reported to the pastor. They may be reported to the board, maybe the official board, basically, is going to have find out about those minor things. But the minor things don't go to a church meeting because those things are not worth taking to that level. But let's say that now you have an issue where there's a withdrawal, literally, that came out of the account that you can't account for. You don't know how it got initiated. You know what happened. You don't know what for, or the reason why it was initiated is not a good reason. It's not a good reason. That it gets reported up, basically. That may not necessarily get to the church level. Okay, we have to think about what makes sense to get to the church level and what doesn't. Okay, but we do want the church to be informed that the internal audit committee is doing their work. Okay, they're doing their work basically, and they're willing to report out those things that happen that should not happen. But the goal should not be, you don't want to shame anybody because they messed up something or whatever. But those things that happen intentionally that were out of order, now you have to report those things. Okay, those things have to get reported up the chain. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go a little bit further. But that's how the process goes, okay? And we can talk more about that as we move on. Okay, internal audit checklist. So hopefully by now, Alexandra, if you can throw that in the chat box again, you probably have already done it a couple of times, you and Michaela. If you haven't had a chance to download this internal audit checklist, like we said, don't worry about it. It's going to come back out to you. But hopefully you have an opportunity to open up that document and to look at it while we're going through it. And you'll see on the first page where it's simply, what is the audit period? What's the name of the church, your city, your state, your federal tax ID number, who is the senior pastor, who is the senior, your steward or your deacon in charge, that person who is going to be in charge of ensuring that the internal audit report gets completed, okay? Someone has the responsibility. And then the trustee, of course, because they got charge of assets, who that head trustee is taking responsibility, and then your financial secretary or treasurer, whatever. Who are those individuals? Their names need to be placed here so that you can know this is the level of individuals who were responsible for this set of financial reports, okay? Date your audit was conducted, who your audit committee members are, and their titles, okay? That's title, you know, I'm the Missionary Society president. I'm the lay organization first vice president. I am a member of the Stewardship and Finance Commission, per se. Those types of, you know, titles, that's who we are. Date received by the senior pastor. This report, of course, goes to the senior pastor first. Date received by the senior pastor. Then date received by the official board, your joint board. You're heading to the next level now. It's been reviewed, you talked to me, and now you're heading to the next level. Now, date reviewed by the church conference or quarterly church meeting for my Baptist folks, however you guys are doing that. Date received by, so we're going to document on our checklist that we covered all the levels and that we reported at the levels that we were required to report at, okay? Now, on this audit certification, and hopefully you're able to see it, I think I've got it on the next slide. And the audit period, as I said, is a 12-month period of time, unless you're doing it in the middle. And I'll talk to you about what you can do in the middle of the year to just do a brief check and maybe cut out a little of your work. So remind me to get back to that. Here's your certification, okay? So what are you certifying here? To the senior pastor, official board, joint board, and church conference. The Internal Audit Committee has inspected the financial position of the church. And when we say financial position, that means where is the church financially as of the date of this report, in accordance with audit guidelines adopted by the church conference. Now you'll see that I have out in your handouts, I've underlined this because it could be adopted by whatever group you say it is adopted by, okay? I just put church conference because it should be a church-wide adoption. The church should agree that this is part of their normal process, okay? So church conference, we have taken steps to see that the financial statements and report of the financial secretary funds present fairly the assets and liabilities of the church, and that the receipts and expenditures and changes in all of our account balances for the audit year are in accordance with the principles authorized by the church conference. So what we're saying is we have just reviewed the financial statements, and we're going to go through all of that in the checklist, and the reports that have been issued by the financial secretary and treasurer, and that those reports present fairly the liabilities and the assets of the church, and the amount of money that came in and the amount of money that went out, and the changes in the cash balances for this year. You're going to be able to review all of that, basically. Our inspection and certificate are not to be construed as an audit. And so we're not issuing any type of opinion because we're not able to do so. Okay, and we're not trying to act like we are a certified public accountant, but we are a duly appointed or duly elected or duly whatever internal audit committee. Okay, and so your audit committee chair signs there basically, and that is the report that ultimately is going to end up in your church records. Okay, this is something that should be recorded and kept in your official church records each and every year. Okay, now we're moving to the checklist. In section 1 of the checklist. And I've highlighted some of these, not meaning that all of these are not important. I highlighted those because I can't go through every one of these questions basically, but I'm going to go through a significant portion of them basically. So now at the very beginning of this process, okay, you've got to understand your bookkeeping system. That is the first thing. You've got to understand how the books are being kept, what the process is. So first of all, does the church have a policy and procedure manual? That sure would make it easy for you if you had a policy and procedure manual. I just will tell you, most of my clients do not. Okay. And so if you got one, then great. But if you don't, then great. And so before I go here, I think I want to launch my polls because I want to get a little bit, I need to find a little bit about you guys. And so Alexandra, before I get started on section 1, if you can launch poll number 1 for me. I just need to understand a little bit about how you guys have used auditing in the past, just to get a bit. And so the first question is, has your church had an external audit at all? Just tell me if you've ever done this before, so I can just get a feel for you all, basically, and just kind of see where we are, basically, just how you've dealt with it and all of the above. So this is kind of an important kind of thing. So have you had an external audit before? So I can know who I got on the line. Cool. Okay, so a lot of you have. That's interesting to see. Very interesting to see. We got 120 out of 160. So come on and tell me, have you basically had an external audit before? Look at this, is actually like 1/3, 2/3 have not. Because I'd love to, I didn't ask the question, but I'd love to know, for those of you who have had external audit, why. But we got another question coming up too. Okay, responses are slowing down a bit, and that kind of gives me a general idea. So Alexander, you can end that poll basically and share the results. Thank you so much. So good. Okay, and so basically we've got, out of the 130 of you who responded, 91 have not had an audit before. So 2/3, 1/3, but 39 have. And so that's good to know. Just kind of so you can put this internal audit process in context. Okay, Alexandra, if you can kick off, you can stop sharing that one. If you can kick off poll number 2 for me, please. Okay, poll number 2 is, does your church follow its approved policies and procedures? Okay, sometimes, oh, I didn't want to see sometimes. I made it an option, but I was like, oh, okay. But sometimes, yes, oh, not at all. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Got a few that said not at all. So does your church follow them? Because if you have policies and procedures in place, it's going to make this process a lot easier. If not, you're going to end up along the way developing your policies and procedures if you start with internal audit, because you're going to have to have something to audit. You're going to have to start somewhere, basically about, what are we trying to find out? Because there's certain things that should be happening. And that's a whole nother class about what policies and procedures should be at a church. But does your church follow its approved procedures? Okay, I've got like 56 that said yes. That sounds great. I love to hear that. Basically, sometimes, so sometimes it's better than not at all, I guess. And so about 13 folks say we don't follow it at all. That's not cool. That's not cool at all. I know I've got my folks that are attending my church financial management class. I've got some of my students on the line. We got to have policies and procedures, right, students? Amen. Okay, Alexander, you can end that poll and share the results with us on that. And so as you see, kind of even between yes and sometimes. And so, only 10% of you were not following them at all. And so that's good. We've got a place to start, basically. And so Alexander, you can stop sharing that one and we can go right to poll number 3. Thank you so much, my dear. And if you were to hire an external auditor, and so some of you have, what would be the main reason, the number one reason why you would do so? Okay, what is the main reason why you would do so? Okay, this is looking interesting so far. And I'm expecting that first answer to be where most people end up at, because that's what we think, an audit is supposed to be. It's supposed to be something that tells us about where we are and what we're doing. And I want you to think about this process in the same exact way. that the goal really is to think about, just policies and procedures, how we are operating and how to be better about how we operate and how to be consistent with it, basically. A couple folks who were changing financial personnel. That's a very good reason to have an audit when you're changing financial personnel. We like a set of audited financial statements. That's why we may have, if you have bank debt or you're trying to get new bank debt, they may require you to get a set of audited financial statements. And so that's it. So great. We've had 133 folks respond. A couple more coming in. Couple more coming in. Okay, great. That's really good. Okay, Alexander, you can end that poll as well and share the results. And so great. Okay, interesting. And so we want to ensure that, yeah, so that's really, and that's what this process is about. So I'm loving to see 72% of you. So we just want to ensure that we are operating with sound financial policies. Absolutely. That is the reason. We'd like to set a audit financially. Sometimes you have to. And so, and when you need audit financial statements, you're going to have to go get an external auditor to take care of that. Okay. We're changing financial personnel. Yes, we want a clean audit. Absolutely. That's a very good reason to do so. We believe we have misappropriation in a couple people, basically, and then one has, one had another reason that's not listed. And so good. Thanks, Alexander, for that. You can stop to share on that. So that's very interesting. That many of you have had audit. Thanks for sharing that. We want to. So yeah, 72%. That's the right reason. So yeah, that's the goal. So thanks so much, Alexander. You can take those down, and I think we can keep on going. Thank you so much, my dear, for that. And so yes, so we are, Alexander, I think I still see the poll. Can you take it down? Maybe I can take it down. That's it. Cool. Thank you all so much for that. Thanks so much for participating in that. Just kind of good to know. And so your reasoning is perfect. You want to, and so think about, as we start talking about this process, think about the fact that you really are trying to design a policies and procedures manual. And you're trying to tighten up and fix and correct the procedures manual we have in place right now. Okay. So has the audit committee agreed that the audit should cover all funds of the church? Now that may seem like an odd question, but it is possible to launch this internal audit on just your building fund. Okay, maybe you just have questions about, transfers in and out of things of that nature, or your scholarship fund or whatever. It's possible to do that on specific funds. Ideally, this internal audit should be on all funds of the church. So the answer to that should be yes in most cases. A no there is simply on that's going to be something that's a rare occurrence basically. Are the books and records that support the work retained in a secure location? Okay, let's understand what we mean about secure. It should be somewhere secure. Secure is not at somebody's house. Okay, that's not secure. That's very insecure, as a matter of fact, because it's at their house. You have no rights to their house. Okay, secure location is at the church per se, and various things in the cloud and secure. So that's what secure means. Secure does not mean at somebody's house. Secure means that it is accessible to the individuals who have the authority over it. Okay, and so if things are at somebody's house, that's not secure. Your answer there is no. We have to secure the access to all of our church records. Is there a secure backup of the books and records? Are you backing up? I have a lot of my clients that are sitting with their software system sitting on a laptop or sitting on a desktop that does not have a backup feature to it. And so what happens when your hard drive goes down, or for God bid, you lose the computer or someone steals the computer, whatever? You don't have any records. And so that is not secure, and that is not a backup. You have to, if you're going to choose to have your software on a standalone computer, you have to have a separate backup, not a backup in the system, but a separate backup basically to your software. And if you don't, it's not secure. And the question is, does that secure backup include all of your cash receipts, money that came in, and all of your checks and disbursements that went out? Does it include a file of published and accepted financial reports? Every report that's published at your official board meeting, at your church meetings, basically quarterly conference, those reports should be included in this secure area of books and records. Does it contain your payroll data and your general ledger detail? Your general ledger detail is all of the listings of checks and every deposit that came in. Do you have a secure mode of having that basically in place? Okay. This is, checks exceeding a certain level requires certain two signatures. Is the chart of accounts in use? Basically, is the primary bookkeeper a paid employee of the church? That can be actually a very important question because it kind of determines from an audit standpoint how we review that individual and transactions that are initiated by that person. Does a church insurance policy include a fidelity bond for this position? That's important to know as well. Okay. Let's keep it moving. I got to get to moving. Okay. Understanding and verifying the financial reports. Okay, so now we've kind of said, okay, do we understand what's going on here? Next, now working, you see this first line, working from a full set of the treasurer's final year-end reports. You have to have a full set of reports to start this process. Okay, and full set of reports, you need to have a balance sheet and you need to have a revenue and expense statement, statement of activities. Do they include the year-end balance sheet in a separate fund form? And we said balance sheet by fund. We're talking about a scholarship fund, building fund, capital improvement fund, central fund, all of those reported separately because they should be separate bank accounts if they are called a fund. Are they basically listed on that report? Two, are they, does your revenue and expense statement, and so whatever you're using, statement of activities, income statement, whatever you call it, for all funds of the church, does it include all of the funds of the church that came in? Is the revenue and expense statement in comparable form? Okay, and my students on here from church financial, the certificate of church financial management know what I'm talking about when I say comparable form. A financial statement means nothing if it's not compared to something. Okay, it means nothing. You have to say, does it reflect your prior year against where you are currently? Does it reflect what your budget was against the actuals? And does it show variances? Okay, any financial report at any church or at any organization, period, financial reports always have to have some type of comparison. I'm comparing this to what? The numbers may look great, but we could be 50% down from last year if I don't see the comparison to last year. Or we could be 25% down from our budget if I don't see the comparison to the budget. So financial reports that go out without a comparison are not worth the paper that they're written on, in my opinion. Are discrepancies over 10% in the comparative statement explained when the reports were presented, communicated, and reviewed? Very important point here. Okay, if we're up, if we're down, or whatever, are we able to explain it? And basically, the Internal Audit Committee says, were they explained, and can we verify the validity of those explanations? This is that's a very important question. Okay. Bank accounts over FDIC, you can read that for yourself. You know that, you know what I'm talking about there. Have you verified the authorized signature names and federal tax ID number? And it's on page 1 on all bank accounts of the church. Hear me, family, very loudly. The names should be current on the bank account. Folks who are dead should not be on your bank account. Okay, folks who are no longer in their position, they've resigned or whatever. When those things happen, you got to go to the bank and change those names. Okay, the Internal Audit Committee is to verify that the names are current on your bank accounts and that the tax ID used for that bank account is the tax ID of the church, not some individuals basically their social security number because they went to open the bank account. This happens a lot when we have these renegade missionary accounts and other folks got all these other ushers got an account, everybody got an account. Well, just keep in mind, those accounts in a lot of instances are not in the name of the church. Okay, you know, I don't believe in that, so I won't start preaching on that because I'll be done took a text. Yes, I will, but they should not be those accounts. If you're going to allow those accounts to exist, make sure that the right persons are that is under the right name, the right signers, and the correct tax ID number. Okay, that is the Internal Audit Committee's responsibility to verify that that's in place. Okay, section 3. Audit documents reviewed, confirmed by the audit committee. Now we're coming into the section where you're now simply reviewing that documentation is properly in place and certain things have been done. Okay, so board minutes, you know what I'm talking about there. Does the annual report to the denomination report financial information consistent with what the treasurer approved year-end financial report states? Y'all know what I'm talking about here. Okay, I ain't got to go too deep with this, but does it reflect? Because keep in mind the responsibility for that basically denomination report, whatever, AMH, we got an annual conference report, the church needs to report that. Is that consistent with what the treasurer has reported to the church? The numbers need to be the same. Okay, and let's say that the annual conference is going to be, your annual report is on a different fiscal year than you're operating, doesn't matter. You still verify that the 12 months that are reported are consistent with the 12 months that you have reported at the church, okay? List of persons authorized for check signing. The Internal Audit Committee confirms that with the bank, not with the people, with the bank, that the persons authorized are done, that's done properly with the bank, and that who has authority to do withdrawals or transfers and disbursements. That is the responsibility of the Internal Audit Committee. They're gathering this information in one place. And a lot of you guys know, basically, sometimes this information can be somewhere, it's scattered all over the place. Somebody knows this, somebody knows that. Well, the purpose of internal audit is to bring it all together so that the information about our financial house is in one place. List of securities and that kind of stuff. Bank statements for the audit year plus last statement for previous year and first statement for current year. I'm on number 6 here. Used to complete the attached proof of cash report for all accounts. Okay, there's in your file that you have, you will see there's a list that says bank accounts. You list the amount, whatever as of date. You take the bank statements and go directly into your report and list the balances on the bank statements, okay? And so therefore the Internal Audit Committee reviews every bank statement for every account, all 12 months, including the bank statement from the last month of the previous year and the first month of the next year. And why do you do that? That's a normal audit cutoff. We want to see consistency. We want to make sure that nothing has been modified or changed, basically. So we kind of make sure we got 14 months to review. So that's what the audit committee does. And then paid checks. If your check copies are returned with your bank statement, ideally great. If not, you have to find a way to have those, and deposit slip. Sample at least 5% of your checks. Are there any unusually large deposits or disbursements or electronic withdrawals from your account? You're going from the bank statements directly. You're reviewing the bank statements. Are there anything? And then as you see those, now you need to go and verify them. Your payroll records, your Form 9, W-I-9 and all of that, you know what I'm talking about there. Savings account and fund statement. So as I said, every bank statement should be reviewed for the year, every bank statement. And ideally, you're going to pull your checks and withdrawals from the bank statement, and then you go back from there. Okay, but this is what we're looking at. We're trying to just kind of verify basically what we're doing, our internal audit group. Next, this is section 3A, really pretty much. Audit documents reviewed and confirmed by audit committee. This is just a rest. We're continuing on with our verifying of documentation. Okay. Are the checking accounts or the check reconciled monthly? And this is not, yes, they're reconciled. This is go verify the reconciliation reports. We're going to ask our accountant or whoever is doing bookkeeping to pull the reconciliation reports for us every month. We want to see that. In a sample of at least 5% of paid checks, at least 5%, I think it should be higher. This is your church. It depends on how big the church is. I have done audits where I reviewed every check. Basically. So at least 5%, I would say the number should be 10, 15, 20% at least, basically. Do your paid checks have the correct authorized signatures? We talked about this briefly earlier. If you said there's 2 signatures and you have already verified who the authorized signers are, now the question is, are those the persons who are signing the checks? Okay. Do each one of the checks have endorsements? You want to see the clear check. You want to see on the back of it, okay, that it was clear. They're like, you're probably saying, Cynthia, what are you talking about? Well, believe it or not, it is possible to create fraud by issuing checks that never go to the bank. You issue the check, you see the dollar amount come out, and you actually go and withdraw that exact dollar amount. So, you know, that's coming from a fraud examiner. So that's why you're asked to look at the endorsements as well. So now these are the days where bank statements give us, you get the full, you can click on the check in the bank, online banking basically, and see the authorization and see the endorsement on that particular check. Look for endorsements. Do payees and amounts match this disbursements register? Does the check amount you see is the check amount that's in the system? Okay. You need to make sure you're verifying. When you're checking that check, you're checking the full audit trail of it. You're going from the voucher to the check to the bank statement and verifying that that is a legitimate vendor, basically, and who you thought it was going to be paid to. Okay, have all voided checks been accounted for? Ideally, you want to go through your check registers. There should be a list of checks, all the checks that were run for the year. And any numbers that are missing should be in a voided check. Voided checks should not be shredded and all of the above. Voided checks should be voided out, written across them, voided, and maintained in a secure location so that you know that those checks didn't turn around later on and actually go through the bank. Okay? And so have they all been accounted for? Are disbursements supported by vouchers approved by the authorized person? When money's going out, is it being properly authorized? As I said, a full audit trail of that check. Are those persons counting receipts required to be unrelated? Okay, we talked about this. Basically, I talked about this with my class. We should not have brothers, husband and wives, brothers, sisters, and all of that on the counting team if we can avoid it. It's not always avoidable in small family churches, but ideally, those persons counting the money and having custody of the money should not be related. Why? Because brothers and sisters were not telling the truth, lying for each other as kids, and they have no problem doing that right now. That's what brothers and sisters do. It's not a bad thing. It's just a fact of life, okay? Basically, and so, but the idea is that it takes, two people colluding together is how fraud occurs. Not the one person getting away with something, but it's two people deciding among themselves that they will defraud the church or defraud someone else. And so we try to make sure that those two persons, it's going to take a little bit of effort to get two unrelated individuals to agree to collude together to defraud. Okay. Are receipts recorded with bank deposits for the year? Are all transfers between accounts able to be traced? Do we know, are we aware of the transfers that are occurring between accounts? Does it make sense for our policies and procedures? Okay. So you want to verify all of the transfers between accounts. Can they be traced? Do we know why? And do we know where it went and all of the above? Can we trace that? Okay. And so there's other things on here, clergy control accounts and things like that. I'm going to try to, well, let's look at, we talked about FDIC insurance. I'm going to hop over that. I'm on number 9 now. Does a clergy control discretionary fund exist outside of the primary church accounts? It must be audited. I have clients who are, I have some Episcopal clients, basically, where they allow their rector, they call them, to have a discretionary fund and it's really for benevolence, basically. And it's the same type of thing that we do with the missionary accounts. If there's any type of account like that you have, basically where the pastor has a fund that he or she is allowed to use for some specific reason, I don't like it. But anyway, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm sorry, that kind of jumped out. I just jumped out on me. But anywho, but if they have an account where they have that type of access, it has to be audited as part of this process. There is nothing that belongs to the church that is outside of the church's purview. Everything that has the church's name on it or comes from church funds that has our name on it should be reviewed as a part of this process. It has to be audited. Okay. And so also number 10 is important too. Does documentation support any checks written to cash? Now we know we really don't want to write checks to cash, but here's the deal. For my other AMEs on the line, we've had to do this at my church and we don't like to do it. Why? Because we're being asked for cashier's checks, basically, for assessments. And so now we're having to go and write checks out to cash in order to basically get a cashier's check to send for assessments. Well, that's a change in policy and procedure, but many of you guys on the line know what I'm talking about. And so we have to make sure that checks made out to cash, well, we know that's a big fat audit, red flag, basically. We have to make sure that the documentation is very clear for why we're doing that. Because that's not, it's not normal procedure, but we have to do what we have to do. And so it's important, basically, family, for us to just kind of say, okay, anything written out to cash, there better be a good reason. There better be a real good reason. Okay, cash receipts. This is section 4, cash receipts. Do the record of total cash receipts coming in agree with the amounts recorded in the cash receipts journal? And when it says cash receipts journal, it's talking about your general ledger, recorded in your financial statements, transaction by transaction by transaction. And these are the days when you guys have all types of monies coming in from all kinds of different places. Cash App, Givelify, your online giving, all of that kind of stuff, PayPal, all that kind of stuff, along with monies that may be coming in by check or whatever. Those things have to be pulled in and they have to agree. You have to see how that's flowing in. You have to see how it reconciles with what's flowing in. So do your record of total receipts agree with the amounts recorded in the cash receipts journal? I'm going to tell you my quick and dirty that's not on your checklist, but this is my quick and dirty for your audit team to check total cash receipts. I want you to take every bank statement, as we had in the previous section. I want you to go and add up every deposit, and not individual deposits, the total deposits for that month. Total deposits, go to next month, total deposits, next month, total deposits, next month, total deposits, 12 months of total deposits. Does that amount look like it's close to what's on your financial statements? Okay, and if not, why not? Okay, and so this is the process you go through of verifying that the cash that's coming in is getting properly recorded and basically on the bank statement. Now, what's the problem here? The problem is, what if the money didn't make it to the bank? What if it got stolen before it got to the bank? What if your process of counting and getting your monies to the bank is flawed or susceptible to manipulation? That's part of your policies and procedures, tightening those things up. But internal audit, you can only review what you have. You have to go from what's basically on the financial statements to what's in the bank, basically. That's what you're talking about here. Contribution budgets, all of that, do they make sense? Are your variances good? Basically, the total amount you thought you'd bring in, are you down? If you're down by $50,000 or $100,000, it needs to make sense to you. You need to know why you're down, okay? Do your acknowledgments of contributions in excess of $250 include a statement that the goods or services provided consist solely of intangible religious benefits? This is an IRS requirement for every giving statement that goes out. It's the Internal Audit Committee's responsibility to ensure that all giving statements are done correctly. Giving statements should be itemized and they should have the disclaimer on them. Okay. This is the last one about endowments. I'm not going to fool with that one right this second. Basically, I'm trying to hit on the general stuff. Next one is property and equipment. Okay. And so this is a biggie. So I kind of highlighted a lot that's here. If your church is not incorporated, are your trustees up to date with the local court? This can be such a big deal. Okay, such a big deal, basically, because you'll see in your checklist, it's saying, please complete the list of on the following page of your trustees. If you are not incorporated, now an incorporated entity has a board of directors, and that board of directors is going to be filed with the state, and that board of directors should be updated as well, but the Internal Audit Committee is not necessarily checking on that per se. But trustees with your court and with your county being registered to transact business, this is a big deal. People who are dead should not be listed with the court as being able to transact business for your church. Keep in mind, it's only the people who are listed with the court, if you're not incorporated, only people listed with the court who are actually legally able to bind your church in transactions. So you want to know who those individuals are, and you want to keep that list up to date if you're not incorporated. It's a good thing to be incorporated. I do suggest that everybody do so, simply so you can move that over to a board of directors per se. All denominations, it's just a good idea for the church to be incorporated. It's not a big deal, get all of that other stuff about what the government can do to you, whatever. They can't do anything per se regarding that. You should be incorporated because it solidifies your authority, okay? And it gets away from having individual trustees having to sign notes with personal guarantees, basically, for the church. So the goal really is making sure that they're up to date and that you know who has legal authority to bind your church, because that's what it means to be listed with the courthouse. Is there a fixed list of fixed assets? Most of my churches don't have this, showing date of purchase and cost. If the answer is no when you first start this process, that's okay. That means that that's an audit report, for your internal audit, and that's something that you're working toward. Keep in mind, your answers don't have to be yes for all of these. Some of them may be no, but the ones that are no, then you know that that's the beginning of setting yourself up with now a policy and procedure manual, okay? And so is there a list of fixed assets? You need to know the building, what you own, okay? I just audited someone that actually came up with, said, oh my goodness, we own that house and I forgot we owned it. I asked them, we ran the records trying to whatever, I didn't know we owned it. Okay, so now let's list everything that we own, basically, including the contents of the church. A lot of times we buy the piano, we buy the pews, we buy the AV equipment, we run it through the income statement, through our statement of activities, and then we lose track of it. Keep in mind, all of your assets, anything that has a life longer than 12 months should be on your balance sheet. And your balance sheet should list the value of all the money and all the things that you put into your church building. Those things should be that. It's very, very important that you have that listed on the balance sheet. So if the answer is no, that's okay. It's an audit point. Let's start working on preparing an inventory of the church. Come up with values. Your insurance coverage should have that listed or something of that nature. Make sure your insurance company coverage is adequate. A lot of you have added a lot of technical information and a lot of stuff basically to your church during our COVID, because you've had to up your AV stuff and buy stuff that you didn't have before, equipment, AV microphones and cameras and all kinds of things you didn't have before. Well, those are assets that we need to add to the valuation of our insurance and all of the above. So do we have a list of assets in the church showing the purchase date and how much it costs? Because if something happens, if your church will burn down, you've got to replace that stuff and you got to know what you have. And that's the purpose of the balance sheet. Has an extensive physical inventory of property and assets been made to the best extent possible? If so, what year did you do that? And if the answer is we haven't done it at all, it's okay. It's okay. Keep in mind, this is internal audit. Okay, this is going to get reported to anybody. This is internal audit. So now we're going to start taking care of our business the way we should. And then are your land and buildings carried on your financial statements? Is the value of your building on your financial statements? Okay, a lot of cases, especially like at churches that are 100, 150 years old, it's not there, but it should be. Okay, and so if the answer is no, that's fine. You got something to work toward. Okay. But we got to get started somewhere. I knew most folks are saying, no, we ain't got that. We ain't got that. It's okay. Liabilities and payroll taxes, okay? Have total wages been reconciled with the quarterly Form 9041, okay? We want to make sure that that's been done. I highly recommend payroll companies, okay? That makes this part a whole lot easier to record. But if you're doing your own payroll or you're doing all 1099s, Lord, don't let me say nothing about that. Have total withholding taxes been reconciled with Form 941? Has it been determined, I'm on number 3, has it been determined that all federal and state withholding taxes were remitted on a timely basis to avoid penalties? So has it been determined? You have to make sure of that. I have so many of my clients that have run into tax issues simply from this, not properly remitting withholding taxes correctly. And that's why you should have a payroll company, because you're going more than likely, unless you got an accountant working for you, you're going to mess this up. And so get a payroll company. They're cheap and they're easy. You get direct deposit and they take care of your quarterly filings. And so because of that, now your internal audit committee can simply just pull the 941s from your payroll company, verify that and all that. Are pension and retirement payments up to date for all eligible employees? If this is a separate calculation, as it is in the AME church, have you remitted what you're supposed to remit on behalf of your employee? Okay. Do you have your signed W-4 forms on file for all employees? Number 7, do unpaid balances per church records match balances as reported by any and all creditors? Here's what this is asking you. This is saying that if you've got bills that are outstanding, now I know many of you on the line probably pay your bills within a 30-day period. Most churches do. But if you are struggling with cash flow and you have bills that are outstanding, the internal audit committee should verify that the amount that, first of all, it's important that the amounts that are outstanding that have not been paid are reported on the reports that are given out to basically to the church in church meetings or whatever. We should report in accounts payable, that's what it's called, accounts payable, how much is outstanding, how much we have not paid. And if you got amounts that have not been paid, does the amount that you're told is outstanding, is that consistent with what the vendor says you owe them? Okay. If you have amounts outstanding, it's important that you just kind of make sure that you see if you got a statement, they've sent a statement in, verify that that amount is correct on your finance so that you can know exactly how much money you owe other people. That's what this question is all about. Verify. And if you don't owe anybody, that's great. But if you got bills outstanding, verify that those balances are correct. Okay. Number 8 is a detailed schedule of all loans prepared, including name of creditor, date of origin, amount of a debt, interest rate, all those things. Verify your loans outstanding. Make sure you know the terms of that. You know when it's going to mature, when it's time to re-up it or renew it or whatever you need to do. Make sure the internal audit committee is verifying that for the church. Okay, and other. This is kind of like the last section per se. Other. Was the proper housing allowance resolution adopted for all employed clergy? And was this resolution recorded in the minutes by the stewards, the deacons, the trustee, whoever has authority for making sure that the housing allowance has been properly done? No, that the housing allowance needs to be adopted formally. That can be adopted with a resolution. Basically, it can be adopted simply by recording an approved budget that lists the housing allowance out. Okay, it has the housing allowance listed and you adopted it. You had minutes that show that it was adopted and approved. That is a proper designation and adoption of a housing allowance. So that is something for the Internal Audit Committee to make sure that that has been done each and every year, because the housing allowance becomes void if it is not adopted each year. Okay, it's not something that goes on, it needs to be adopted. We have to agree to pay that amount to the pastor for that year. Has insurance coverage been reviewed? Make sure that any new construction or additional programs or any changes that you've made to your church, you've had a daycare, you got a school, make sure those things have not been left off of the insurance coverage. Make sure everything is covered. Number 3, has there been an inquiry as to whether there are any contingencies or commitments facing the church? Is somebody threatening to sue you? Is there something going on? Did somebody, you had construction going on, did somebody fall? Did somebody fall out, on the snow and ice during the bad weather, and you're being threatened with legal action? It's important for that contingent liability to be disclosed. Okay. Is there a current space use agreement and an insurance certificate on file for anybody coming into your building using it? Does your insurance cover that? Okay. Does your insurance cover that? So this is, we kind of got to the bottom of it. As I mentioned, there are sections in this report basically that I'm hopping over it, going down it. There is section 3A, your bank accounts. Okay. You get this from the bank accounts only. So I'm looking at the form right now. That's on page 3 of your form. And then on page 6, under number 7A, is the list of your approved trustees. Okay. And you want to verify with the court that those persons have been appointed if you are not incorporated. If you're incorporated, you don't have to take this particular step. But if you're not incorporated, basically, I don't think I put on here. At the bottom of page 6 on your form, it talks about the things that need to be attached to this internal audit report. It talks about your year-end treasurer's report, of course, showing total receipts and disbursements for the year, a proof of cash form, so the bank accounts, that is important, that has already been listed. You don't have to have the bank statements attached, only the proof that and signed by the committee that you've approved it, and your reconciliation of your cash balances, a copy of the insurance declarations page, so that you know that everything is covered. You're going to keep that with your internal audit report. And then a copy of any audit findings, anything that you found this year, basically, that you're reporting, and your report on what happened in the previous year. And so, yeah, we're doing good. 10:20, I'm very proud of me because we're trying to stay on schedule here, basically. So it's 10:21. That is all of the slides going through, taking you through that internal audit checklist. As I said, I know that was pretty intensive. I'm sorry about that. I know it was. There's a lot of stuff there, but look through it. And I see we got questions in the Q&A, but look through it, come up with your questions and let's see what we can do. The goal is for you to be able to basically come up out of this training able to get started on implementing. You may not have every answer that you need, basically, but I think that you can do this. And the goal is to just get started. Just get started. You got the checklist, basically get started. And like I said, if a lot of answers are no, if the answers are no, that just allows you to set your audit findings up, basically. These are the things that we need to do. Okay, this gives you a chance. So even though a lot of you guys, 72% of you basically said that your concern was that you wanted to make sure that you had good policies and procedures. And that's why you would try to get an external auditor to come in. Well, as you see, you can go through this and really kind of determine that for yourself. And what's beautiful about it is that it's your own folk okay? And you can really design it for what's best for your church. And that's what's important. Every church is different. Every church is different. And we want to take the time to put policies and procedures in place that make sense for our church. That doesn't mean internal controls and the right way to do things. That can be a bit narrow per se, but you can fit the things that are needed at your church within those narrow confines if you understand what those confines are. And this list of internal control checklist gives you those basic confines, okay, to work with. So I think I'm ready to take questions, Alexandra, if you are ready, my dear.
Alrighty. Our first question is, how do you keep vindictive people or untrained people off the committee if nominations come from the floor? Can we use a nomination committee or present a list of nominees for the vote?
That's a really good question. That is a really good question. Okay. And so how do you keep vindictive people off of the committee? You know what? That's a hard thing to do. I think, first of all, the first thing is and keep in mind, they are only one person. If you can't keep it, nominations come from the floor. We know who they are. Okay, probably. We in the church, we know who they are. They're only one person on the committee, and you can try to find a way, but yes, you can definitely use a nominating committee. You can, as long as it doesn't appear that the nominating committee's purpose is to eliminate persons who should be on the committee. You know what you kind of know where I'm going with this, okay? We don't want to interject the fact that we don't want to interject that we're trying to manipulate who goes on the committee. But I do think it's very important that you do suggest basically and outline what you're trying to do, and the fact that and you can actually say vigilantes, or I wouldn't call them that. We won't say that. Anyone that has an agenda, that's not the purpose of this committee. Say that, be bold about what you're looking for so that you can get agreement in the church, basically, of what we're trying to do. So be very obvious and be very bold about why you're putting this committee in place and what it's supposed to do. But one vigilante won't kill you if you've got 3 people. But if you got a vigilante, please make sure that you possibly have more than 3 people. Maybe it's 5, because you want that person to be outnumbered. And you want somebody on the committee also that can nullify that person too, okay? And we know there are individuals out there that can be like, no, we're not having it, okay? This is what we're trying to do. So even in, situations, we know the vigilantes are out, they're gonna look for this, oh yeah, I wanna be on that. But you can find ways, I think, to keep them off. What's important is that you recognize that they've got an agenda when they get on the committee. Okay, and if you state all of those kinds of things, and however, nominating committee or whatever, but I'm afraid of a nominating committee because the nominating committee usually takes people and determines what their qualifications are in order to be on the list. And if you start eliminating people, then you start putting a cloud, on your process, and that's not the goal. It's better to allow that vigilante to be on there with others than to appear to be hand selecting who can be on the committee. Hope that answered that question. You ready, Alex?
Our next question is the 60 days related to the time needed to get the records ready for review, or when the audit date is set?
It actually, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it is how the number of days basically it takes for your financial people to close out that year, finish all of their year-end work, finish their reconciliations, get the reports ready. Hopefully the reports should have actually been presented basically before you start this internal audit process. Okay, you should be reviewing something that has already been presented and put forward. And so the 60 days really is the amount of time it takes the financial people to prepare the books and records for review. Good question. Go ahead, Alex.
If the committee members are not appointed by the pastor, how do you communicate this to a pastor?
So you feel, so how do you communicate it to your pastor? So I think that you might want to show them the video, but I think if you committed, just simply saying that, Pastor, we'd like to put in place internal audit committee so that we can do a better job of having oversight and accountability for our financial records. And so I think that should be, and that we want it to be, it needs to be representative of the church so that it can be fully accepted. So if you describe the process and that it should not be appointed by the pastor because it has to appear to be independent, go through the full process, go through all the things that I talked about earlier as to why it should not be appointed. This should not be appointees. It really needs to be reflective of the church. If you allow it to appear to be a tainted committee, it will have no credibility whatsoever, and the whole process is defeated. And even though, you may have the best pastor, kindest, most wonderful, most objective person in the world, people still need to have it to be independent of the pastor, simply for its independence, basically, and the appearance of independence can make or break this committee. It is a waste of time and an exercise in futility if it is believed, basically, that this committee is appointed and that they won't, because once they're appointed, then the assumption is that they will overlook things of the person who appointed them. For those of you who are, well, actually all of my church folks on here, you know how that appointed thing goes, okay? People assume that those persons are not as independent as they should be, basically, because they are beholden to the person who appointed them. Okay, we don't need that for internal audit. It will kill internal audit. So explain the process to that pastor, to your pastor, about what you're trying to do and why it's so important that it always appears to be independent. That's very important. That was a very good question. Thank you for that one. Go ahead, Alex.
I've got the next one. In the auditing process, what are some of the information needed?
In the auditing process, and so I tried my best to list for you on the internal audit checklist the things that are needed. And so let me just give, but I don't mind giving you a list, because that's not an unreasonable question whatsoever. Let's start off, of course, with the financial statements. And this is your list of things that you're going to want to receive. Financial statements, year-end financial statements, that would definitely be an income statement of activities with revenues and expenses reported, and a balance sheet with your assets and your liabilities clearly listed. You also want to receive a copy of every bank statement for every account for every month. Okay, that's important, including the beginning of that next year and the previous one from the other year. So you've got that 14-month period of time. You want to receive a check register, a list of every check that was cut, basically, for the year. You also receive a general ledger detail. And a general ledger detail is a listing of every deposit, every line item, every check, every journal entry, every whatever. A full list of a general ledger detail. And the general ledger detail is where you're going to make your selections from. Okay? Those are the transactions that you're reviewing, and you're going to trace things from your general ledger to the bank statement. Keep in mind, if it didn't happen in the bank statement, it didn't happen. It's not real. And so until you trace it to the bank statement, it's not real. So all of the things that appear in your accounts are things that should have a life somewhere, one way or the other, on your bank statement. So the goal is bank statements, Journal ledger detail of all the transactions that occur, check register, so you can see that full list of checks, so that if any check numbers are missing, you can see that and ask questions about those missing check numbers. Take your bank statements, you're gonna look at the withdrawals, money that was taken out of the bank that may not be listed as a check or withdrawal. Look at your bank statements for what has happened on your bank statements during that period of time, okay? And so those are pretty much the things that you're going to need to start this internal audit process. Now, you see there's other things in there about minutes and things like that. Those are ancillary things, basically, but those are the core things that allow you to review the financial activities of the church. Good question. Who's next, Michaela or Alexandra?
I am again.
Okay.
If a changeover of a treasurer occurs at year end before the audit, is the incoming treasurer responsible for getting the records ready for the audit?
I think that's a good question. I think that answer has to be yes. Because the question is, why did your treasurer leave at the end of the year? But keep in mind, you can't make people do things. And so if that person has left, then if they've left, they've left. And so yes, the person coming in needs to be able to pull together whatever they can. And then their answer may be, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't have the ability to pull the documentation needed for the internal audit, basically. And so, yes, I realize it probably feels very unfair to be put in that situation. But the answer has to be yes, unfortunately, that person has to prepare for. You surely don't say, well, we're not going to have an audit this year because the person has left. No, that's not the answer. The answer is do the best you can. And the audit has to take into consideration that that new person does not have the same level of knowledge or can answer the same questions that the previous person could. But you got to kind of keep moving. Things happen. Next question.
Should we allow the Finance Commission to see this auditing checklist before the audit?
Oh, yeah. See, this is, this should not be, it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise. And what you're doing is you're kind of putting people on notice that these are the things that we need to review. But I believe that as you go through the process of adopting this internal audit process, that you're going to have to communicate what you're doing and why you're doing it. I get what you're saying, and you don't want people to know what you're going to be looking at until you look at it per se. But keep in mind, the goal of putting it in place is to be a deterrent. You want people to know, yeah, we're looking, and this is the stuff we're going to look at, and we know how to look at it. And so, yes, but I get what you're saying. It might be nice to kind of have the element of surprise on your side, but I think that it's more important to communicate it widely, because we're trying to create a fence. Lord, be a fence all around. We're trying to create a fence. We are creating a barrier. We're trying to say these are the standards that we're setting. This is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to go about it. And so if you're going to work with us, these are our standards. We may not be there yet, but this is where we're heading, and these are the criteria that have to be met in order for us to consider that our internal processes are operating the way that we want them to operate. So that was a very good question. Thank you for that. Next question.
How do you establish a backup for paper receipts?
That's a good question. One of the easiest ways to do is that you probably should have, everybody should really have a scanner these days. And honestly, I would love for you to have some cloud storage as well. But the best way to basically, do that is in a most simple way is purchase a fireproof safe. Okay, make sure that you have a safe with drawers, sets of drawers, or whatever, lockable, basically that is fireproof. It should still be at the church, basically, and maintained. That is the most simple way. But ideally, I would love for you to be scanning documents. find a way to, move as far away. It's good to have, your records basically in place, but when it comes down to maintaining them, there could be offsite storage for your records. There could be scanning to a Dropbox or a box.com, an electronic place to store stuff. But basically, if you're at a small church and you just need to find a way to just safeguard it, then at the church, fireproof, locked cabinet that is something that can be carried out of the church as well, per se, in some kind of secure manner. Basically, group of file cabinets, fireproof, locked, and maintained in a locked room. So you kind of have to work your way around that. There's a couple things going on, but those types of things are probably the best start at that. If you don't want to go, scanning is the way that I would like to suggest our churches start heading. We want to kind of start scanning things and getting away from the paper files so we can share things electronically, and that this internal audit process could possibly be done remotely, and not necessarily have to sit in the church and do it. So we're heading there. We're just not there yet. So that's a good question. Very good question. Thank you so much for that. Next question.
If a check was not cashed due to not being received by the payee, how to clear it and repay the payee?
The best way to do that is to void the check. Void it out in your system and just reissue another check to that person. It happens a lot. People lose checks. I don't lose checks, but people do lose checks. And so it happens frequently. So yeah, the best way to do that is just void it out and reissue it. And so we talked earlier about reviewing all of the voided checks. You would see that voided check, and then you would see the reissued check. And then the void usually has a reason. So write on those voided checks the reason why you're voiding it. Said, did not cash, reissued with check number such and such and such. All of that's written onto the voided check and put into that file, or however you're maintaining it. That's the best way to do that. Next question.
If trustees sign for a mortgage loan, are they responsible for the loan? Or if the church is incorporated, does that cover them for from individual responsibility?
Yes, you got it out, Michaela. You did a good job, baby. Thank you, sweetie. Yes. Aren't you guys? I'm so grateful to have these two with me today. And so, yes, if the trustees sign for the loan, keep in mind, if you're not incorporated, yes, when the individual's trustees sign for the loan, they are signing on as being personally liable for that loan. For my church, I signed as a trustee the first mortgage note for our church. There was 10 of us, and we sat around the table with the attorney, and the attorney says, you do recognize that even though you are a trustee, you're signing as a trustee, that ultimately you are personally liable, each one of you personally, individually, and severally, and liable for the repayment of this loan. We accepted that responsibility, all of us together, basically, and then the church repaid the loan, and that loan was burned years ago. Hallelujah. But I did that. And so, yes, if you are not incorporated, when your trustees sign your mortgage note, they are liable for the payment of that loan. And prayerfully, your church will be able to fully execute and pay that loan off. But yes, that is the situation. Now, if you are incorporated, basically, you have now put a corporate veil or shield between personal responsibility and the bank. And so now that corporation basically is responsible for paying back that loan. Now, the loan, of course, is going to be secured by your church building. That doesn't mean they can't take your church building, but it does mean that the individuals who are part of your board of directors who sign for that loan, I'm going to sign Cynthia, I may be the president, I may be the trustee, I may be the secretary of the corporation. I'm signing it, but I am not personally liable for repayment of it. I'm only signing it as part of my responsibility as the secretary of the corporation. The corporation is responsible and I am not personally responsible. And that's why, and that's a great question. That's why I really believe that all churches should incorporate, simply to shield individuals from personal responsibility. Now, that doesn't mean that if you pastor counsels somebody and that person goes and commits suicide or something of that nature, those other types of liabilities, that sometimes it depends on if that person was at fault or if they were negligent. Those things can lead to personal responsibility, but your insurance policy should cover those types of things as well. But when it comes down to, you can only get out of those things that you act on as part of a corporation. If you do something intentional, then you're going to be held liable. But if you're a corporation and you're just simply signing as the secretary or the president or the vice president or whatever, you are not personally liable for that. You are simply signing as part of your responsibility as an officer of that entity. And that is a big deal when it comes down to our churches. That is a very big deal. Okay. And so that was a great question. Thank you so much. I hope I made that clear to you as well. Next question.
If the church has living house arrangements, parsonage, home, apartment, etc., please explain housing allowance.
Oh, housing allowance. Okay. Now you've asked me a question that's outside the realm of this particular this particular training session. But housing allowance is basically, of course, the idea of setting a housing allowance up for your pastor, basically. If it's a parsonage, the rules are slightly different, basically. Housing, if the person owns their own house, then you can allocate a portion of their compensation to housing, basically. So I'm sorry, I can't go too much deeper into that because that's kind of like another class per se, and I don't want to get us off topic. And if you want to send me an email regarding that, then I can explain that to you a little bit more. But basically, I probably better stick with the topic for today. Basically, if I'm going to, it's 10:44, so I probably better get through this. So I don't want, because housing allowance is a long conversation. It really is. And so it all depends on the circumstance and the situation, but it is a portion of your pastor's compensation, and it should be the first portion. Okay. If your pastor does not make much money, please make sure that the pastor has a housing allowance in place to take care of their housing. It's a benefit to them. You want to treat it the right way and you want to offer it to them. But send me an email if you'd like to talk more about housing allowance. Okay, go ahead, Alex or Michaela, whoever has the next question.
Please describe formal systems of financial policies and procedures.
Okay, so the formal process, this is actually the beginning. An internal audit checklist is really the beginning of formal policies and procedures, because the goal is for policies and procedures that you need to basically have prescribed procedures so that you are able to take in money, okay, receive money from donors or givers or congregants or members, or however you want to refer to them, receive money in, properly account for it directly for them on their giving statement, properly account for it by counting it correctly and getting it to the bank correctly, and making sure that your deposits reconcile with basically the money that came in, okay? And then dispersing money, getting money out the door properly. You want to have proper approvals. There needs to be a request, a voucher form or something of that nature, requesting money to go out the door. There needs to be someone to approve that request. The person requesting it should not be the person who approves it, because there's more than one person that should understand and know that the money is going out the door. And then it should be transmitted to your finance people for them to have proper documentation so that they can actually issue that payment out. And then there needs to be proper follow-up that check has been properly cashed, that there's money in the bank, and that you've got procedures in place to make sure you get enough money to take care of your responsibilities. And so your policies and procedures encompass all of that. The basics of policies and procedures are really described in this audit checklist of all the things that you need to touch on when it comes down to deciding what your policies and procedures are. And so it can be a kind of a drawn out process, but I would suggest that you start with this checklist. All the different categories, there's receipts, there's liabilities, there's understanding the financial statements and the reporting responsibilities. Start from there and start putting procedures in place to make sure that you can actually answer every question on this checklist, yes. And that is a good way to get started with your formal policies and procedures. But usually, if you're going to do a good job with that, it is a process. You start with a set. At my church, I've been doing this work for 30 years at my church. We have developed and revised along the years to tighten up those policies and procedures as things change and all of that. So start somewhere, and this internal audit checklist is a good place to start, and then build on that. Basically, as time goes on, refine it, tighten it up. When you find holes, tighten it more so that the church, but you don't want it to be so legalistic that it ties your church down and that there's too many checks and balances in place for everything, because a lot of times you got a lot of volunteers. Let's not kill the volunteers. Let's not kill them. Let's put things in place basically so that they can process and move things along in the most effective and the most efficient way possible. But this is a good start. And so that's a good one. I would love to see everybody trying their best to come up with a policies and procedures manual. Start somewhere. It doesn't matter how little it is. Just start and build, start and build. So that was a great question. Thank you so much for that question. Next one.
Should finance committee have bylaws and structures with officers?
Say that again, Michaela. Should the finance committee
have bylaws and structure with officers?
Should the finance committee have bylaws and instructions with officers?
Yes.
Bylaws. Should the finance committee have bylaws and structure with officers? I'm not sure I fully get that one. Can you put that question can you kind of clarify that question for me again in Q&A? Michaela, I'm not talking about you, the person who asked that question. If you guys could you rewrite that one for me and make it a little bit more clear? Because I'm not sure I fully get the question. I'm struggling with that one. I'm sorry. Just not quite getting it. Go ahead, Michaela, to the next one, please.
At times, the vigilante has overwhelming personality that many persons are afraid to confront in the church. Would it be appropriate for the pastor to restate the purpose of the committee? Ooh, it cut off.
Yeah.
I have the question cut off, so I don't see it.
But I think you kind of got most of it, Michaela. So thank you, sweetie, for that. Yeah, you're right. Those vigilantes can be overpowering personalities in the church. But yeah, at that point, you just kind of got to like beat down the beast. You really do, and what we need to recognize is it's not good to allow vigilantes to dominate the church. All you do is create a bad environment for people to do the work of the Lord and try to volunteer and all the above. And so, yes, it's going to be important at that point for the pastor to say, no, that's not what we're here for. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to put a committee in place to review and tighten up our policies and procedures and all of that. It's important to do that. And, if the vigilante is too strong of a personality, then, you may have to talk to them or whatever. You may have to do that thing. But I agree. If that person is a strong personality, basically you're going to have to find a way to still get the work done in spite of them. And what you need to also do is fall back on the fact that you have a checklist here. You're not going to get off on tangents. You're going to simply go yes, no, and deal with those things that need to be dealt with. There's no if, and buts in between. Don't let your vigilante throw your process off. But yes, please encourage your pastor to, and then, I wish people sometimes would not sit back. We know when we got a vigilante. And we need to, there's more of us than there is of them. And so why we can't handle this, we need to handle it because it's killing our churches. And so that's a good question. But you can do it. You can do it, especially if you get the pastor to assist you. You can do it. So I'm encouraging you, and I'm wishing the best for you with that, because that's a matter that needs to be handled anyway. Don't get me started, but it needs to be handled. Next question, please.
In the AME Church, we have a process called quarterly conference. What is its purpose?
What is its purpose? I know you're not asking me that question. The purpose of it, we know the purpose of quarterly conference. It's in the discipline, basically. But it's important to get this process. It is important that this process possibly ends up as being part of the quarterly conference. I'm going to introduce this idea of internal audit as a point of a legislation proposal for the AME Church. I'm going to try to get it through the CLO legislation committee. Y'all pray for me because they're a pretty rough group. But we're going to try to get this in so that it can become something that might be questioned as part of the quarterly conference. But we know the purpose of the quarterly conference. And so this internal audit should rise as high as your pastor and your official board thinks that it should go. Maybe it should never get to the quarterly conference. That's up to you guys. But that's interesting. So next question, please, because we are about to run out of time.
Should the church's financial secretary and or treasurer be part of the internal audit committee?
No, that's a great question. That's a great question. And I should have said that already. So thank you for that. No, they are not part of the committee. They assist the committee, but those individuals, anybody who had responsibility for preparing the financial statements is not a part of this committee. And so I thank you so much for answering that question, because I should have said that a long time ago. No, these are people who are outside. And just like I said, this is not a bunch of stewards, because stewards are appointed by the pastor. Not a bunch of trustees are elected, basically at most churches. But this is an independent group of individuals, and you cannot participate in an audit of your own financial records. This is a time when those persons, financial secretary, treasurers, and your finance committee, anybody who's assisting with putting the finances together, whatever, this is a time for them to sit on the outside. They're the ones that the audit committee asks questions of to get clarification or if they need additional information, but they do not participate in the process. It's their work that's being reviewed. Okay, and so no, they are not part of the process. And thank you so much for asking that question, because I should have said that already. Absolutely. Next question. You got 5 minutes.
How long should you keep records in the archive before shredding?
IRS actually that has a 7-year window of questions, but I would say if your giving records are electronic, you should not have to keep envelopes any more than 3 years. But if you are, everything's still being done by paper, I think you probably need to stick with this 7-year rule. You never know when somebody may need to ask you for something that dates back several years. So 7 years if you're paper, but if you are electronic, let's say you have a giving, you're using some type of software that allows you to record your giving for your giving statements. I hope all of you guys are doing that, but if you're not, then if you're using electronic something, then I would say that you can only have 3 years of paper, because you're going to have the detailed information even if you don't have if you don't have the paper to support it. 3 years if it's electronic, 7 years if you're on a total paper system. Next question, and we're getting down to the last one or two. And Michaela, did that question ever come in that was trying to be clarified? Did that ever?
No, it did not.
Okay, thanks, dear.
Okay, who gets records ready for audit review? Treasurer or bookkeeper? Bookkeeper is the only one who has access to all records.
And why is the bookkeeper the only person who has access to all records? But it's probably going to be the bookkeeper that is going to get everything ready for audit. Okay. But the bookkeeper should not be the only person that has access to anything. There should be no one person that has sole access to your financial records. Okay. Everything, that's why we're talking about a secure place, a place that's available to all authorized persons. It's good to keep it under lock and key and keep it tightly secured. But it's not good that that person is the only person that has access. But yes, it is your bookkeeper, normally the one who's preparing the financial statements, entering in the data. They're the ones who are going to be preparing for audit, more than likely. And that's why they're not part of the audit team, because they're the one preparing the documentation. So in most cases, that is the person. So whoever's preparing those records, that's who's doing it. Okay, we are at our last question. I'll do my best if there's anything else. Alexandra or Michaela?
There's one more question.
Okay.
How often will you offer this seminar? There are other leaders who I will recommend to attend.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a good place to end, Michaela. Thank you so much. The recording for this seminar will be out and will be sent out to every registrant. We had actually over 300 people register. And so everybody will receive the recording and the link to the recording. They will receive a copy of the internal audit checklist. I'm actually going to get this thing to be PDF fillable. It's not right now, but I'm going to send that out along with the slides from the webinar. So all of that is going to come out to each and every registrant, basically, so you can look at the video again. There's no plans right now to do this class again. And we are, Turner, we are working with Turner to just roll out all types of different, as you can see, there's all types of topics to talk about, all types of things to discuss. Basically, when it comes down to our finances and how to get things in order. So we may actually do a class on policies and procedures and all of that, but there's no plan right now to repeat this particular class. So definitely send people out. Once you get the recording link, feel free to send anybody out to the recording and share any information with them. It's for you. The checklist was created specifically for you. And so I just want to thank each and every one of you for coming to today. Thank you so much, Alexandra and Michaela, for the wonderful job that you guys did as hosts today. You guys, please help me congratulate and thank my steady hosts who are so qualified to do the work. And thanks so much for Dr. Davis. I'm not sure if she's able to still be on, but thank to her for coming in and saying hi to us. Once again, we are doing a lot of work trying to do the best we can to educate on the things that are needed at the church. The certificate of church financial management class that I have going on right now, wonderful students in there. We're going to be doing that class again in the fall of next year. We'd love for you to come and choose to join Turner and enroll for that class. It is an extensive class. You are really earning a certificate. I'm getting you ready. We're taking you through every policy, procedure, how to do everything in the church for finances in that certificate. So you have to earn your certificate, but it surely is worth having. If you have finance people who have not been trained, it's a wonderful class for them to attend. So once again, we thank you so much for attending. You be blessed. Take care of yourself. Have a wonderful weekend, and we bid you farewell. God bless each and every one of you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, and thank you for attending. Goodbye.